It's officially called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The historic agreement would curb nuclear activities in Iran and lift economic sanctions against the country. Joining me with the details is Middle East and international security expert Rick Epps. And Rick, some key points Iran agreed to in reducing its nuclear activity include reducing and restricting nuclear enrichment. What does that mean?
Well, what it means is right now, currently, they have 19,000 centrifuges. They're going to be reducing that number down to 6,104, of which only 5,060 can be allowed to be used for enrichment. Enrichment is simply the process by which you develop the byproduct of plutonium to make a nuclear weapon. What they're being asked to do is to enrich to only up to 3.67%, which is the max you can do for civilian purposes. And they've agreed to that number. So that's what keeps it in, allows you to have peaceful nuclear fuel, but not for weapons grade material.
Well, they also agreed to extend the current breakout time to make a uranium weapon from 2 to 3 months to 1 year.
Exactly.
And they said some facilities will be changed. What facilities are we talking about and how will they change?
Okay, well, particularly the Fordow facility, which is basically built into the side of a mountain, which we found out about 6 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. What they've said now is that they're going to restrict that completely, that for 15 years, that will not be allowed to enrich any uranium. And then they have 1,000 centrifuges there now they can use for research, but they will not let them use it for anything else. The other facilities are also going to be whittled down and modified for research purposes, but not for centrifuge enrichment.
And the plan also calls for the UN to monitor compliance, and Iran promises to redesign, as you mentioned, that second newly built reactor and reprocessing facility, as you said, to be used, not to be used for research and development, correct?
Well, it's going to be used for research and development, but not
instead of making nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Aside from reducing nuclear attacks or the threat of nuclear attacks and lifting the sanctions, why is this deal so important?
Well, you know, one of the things about this is that, we created the Iran we live with today. Let's be candid about this. We created this Iran in 1953.
You mean the U.S.?
The U.S. through the CIA and for forcing out a democratically elected leader who was Mohammad Mossadegh, that led to we reinstalled the Shah, led to the revolution that led to the theocracy we live with today. So we created this monster ourselves, to be honest. Now, the groundbreaking part of this is that we have been at odds with Iran for decades. And for us to be able to, and with the Iranian regime also behind us in this endeavor, and I believe Rouhani is really making strides to make this happen. He wants this, and so do the Iranian people. In Tehran, they were celebrating in the streets last night, all over the country. Yes, there are people who still have other issues, but to be honest with you, this is a great first step. It's not a perfect agreement, but it's a great first step, and it's a tip of the iceberg to something that would allow for stability in the Middle East, and then we get to a point of diplomacy where we can start dealing with some of the other greater threats in the Middle East.
The U.S. and European Union will suspend sanctions if Iran complies and it's verified of their compliance with this agreement.
Exactly.
How soon could that happen, and what happens if they don't comply?
Well, a couple things. June 30th is the tentative cutoff date. And I say tentative because if we're getting close to a deal, they're not going to subvert a deal if we're getting down that road. And in that, there's a lot of politics to be played with that, and certainly that's the greater concern here is in the U.S., how is a conservative Congress going to play this? Are they going to use it for their own political gain as opposed to looking at the reality of the potential of this deal? And also the peripheral, the states, other nation states in the region who don't want to see Iran in a better light than they do right now for lots of other reasons. If the deal doesn't get done, I don't think even if it doesn't get done right now that we're not going to continue the effort.
Well, what I mean basically, so we're looking at June 30th for this tentative cutoff date, but if Iran fails to comply with what they've agreed to, will sanctions be restored?
Oh, absolutely. That's why it really is a no-win. There really isn't a lose in this situation, because when you look at it, always we can make the measures even more punitive if we choose to. But in Iran's interest, they recognize now, and I think they really understand that the nuclear weapon deal of having a nuclear weapon is not the best path to diplomacy and economic gain. If you want to be a player in the global system now, you have to come with it at an economic way, and I think they recognize that.
Okay, let me ask you this. You've got about 15 seconds
Sure,
to
sure.
answer this. Some hardline critics say this tentative deal is not a good thing. What is their argument, and is this a stable deal? Will those critics be able to unseat this deal?
Well, hopefully they won't. In Iran, the hardliners say they've given away, that Iran's given away too much for it. And the people in Iran and the Ayatollahs say absolutely that's not true, that in fact that what we really gain a tremendous amount of advantage with our building our economy out of this. And I believe they're right. I believe the economics and the political system will be in better shape after this is done.
All right, Rick Epps, thanks so much for the update.
Good to see you, Peggy.